Hey guys, it's Mather here once again, and I'll be damned if we haven't pulled out another build that has like contention for build of the league, because this thing is pretty cracked. We are talking a int stack using a Dagger, Trickster with Wild Strike and Nimmies. So there are several portions to Wild Strike, and one of the portions is a projectile which looks and acts like Freeze Pulse, and it can return proj and could in the past, but it would never double hit. Up until I think this latest season, league, whatever, I think it now does double hit, and that's why I wanted to make a build revolving around double hitting and return proj with Wild Strike Freeze Pulse projectile. However, as a int stack character with lightning damage, I wanted to go that route as well for the CI and the sort of thick nature of it. You do have to still keep the lightning portion of the skill, which is arc and chain. And that means that I'm not just purely projectile based with pure return proj, I am also arc and chain and lightning based, as well as a bit of cold based. All in all, that has led to a extremely satisfying and powerful Wild Strike build that has both projectile and chain, really good lightning damage, some good cold damage, and then on top of that, a pretty fucking thick character. So this is a Trickster that is int stacking and CI based, and because of that, with some masteries, it also fixes up your defenses through the form of evasion. You get up to in this situation, something like 200% increased evasion, maybe even more. And then with just something like a Grace on and the Trickster defenses, I got like 70k evasion. Throw in the Ghost Shrouds, throw in a Fortify tattoo, guaranteeing you Fortify. Throw in Instant Leech and Overleech, get a bit of a Spell Suppress. You got yourself an absolute beast of a character. I've yet to take on any true endgame, the Uber bosses and stuff, but I do think this would be one of the first characters that can actually tank a lot of those mechanics, and maybe it can then just straight up face tank and do all of the damage it needs to do without too strict of a gameplay routine. Yeah, it's just been a very good character, and on top of that, I think it can be done on somewhat of a budget as well. The Nimmies portion does not seem strictly important in this. The return proj, given that it's only working for half my skill, and the return proj then potentially doubles the damage of the cold portion of Wild Strike. But on top of that, you could do int stack with Hand of Wisdom and Action, the usual Hoa Claw situation. I chose daggers this time around because I wanted to play with daggers for a change, and you can get good synthesized daggers or craft your own through Shaper or Hunter situations, but synthesized ones existed and they didn't cost fuck all because no one plays with daggers, so we did one of those, and the result was still pretty massive. But you can do Hand of Wisdom in Action for a much more simple build, or you could even do Energy Blade Trickster as a CI with just a whole bunch of int and energy shield stacking, then uses Energy Blade and will result and yield a lot more damage than what my character currently has. But not sure I could really justify throwing out another Energy Blade build at you guys, but it is maybe just a stronger version of what I'm doing here. Regardless, the real sending home point here is CI Trickster with a bunch of int stack does do some pretty good things thanks to a few masteries, thanks to Polymath being pretty damn nice, and Energy Shield Overleech as well as Instant Leech being pretty damn nice too. You can also notice on top of that I'm using a additional 4-link for Val Lightning Strike. It does help damage, it's not at all mandatory, but I did have a spare 4-link for anything I wanted in this build, and why not just have a Lightning Strike, given that we are using Return Proj as well. It lets just have a bit more burst, and it's very pretty, but of course it does tank our bitrate quite a bit, and yeah, makes the quality of the videos a bit worse. Which I did notice the feedback on for the last one, and I do apologize. I'm not sure I can do anything about that for the current situation, but maybe it's a issue on my behalf that I can do something about. But I'd have to somehow look into that because I'm bad at this. Anyway, yeah, Wild Strike Trickster. The only other thing I was also going to say is that it's a pretty flexible template with just about any projectile skill. So you could do Frostblades, Lightning Strike, you could even do non-projectiles if we're getting down to the nitty-gritty, but you know, with the Nimmy's interaction, you can get Frostblades, Lightning Strike, you can do Wild Strike, you can do Molten Strike, and all of those will have pretty high effectiveness in this type of a setup, or potentially even high setup. And I do have an example of a good Energy Blade build that you can look at if you're looking at a thicker setup than what I've got here. In any case, let me show you what I've done with this one so far. So here's the character at the moment, level 94, Wild Strike Q. So Wild Strike with IQ. 1300 int, 9.7k ES, and I have not really gone out of my way to be very thick or, build super defensively. It just kind of happens with this setup that as a package kind of made sense to go into certain directions. But we are built around 1 to 6 lightning damage to attacks per 10 int. So as I said, you can get a synthesized dagger, if the market dictates that you can, for cheap, which I could prior to making this build. And then you craft some lightning. I had some cold on it as well. I then did a prefix cannot be changed and was hoping to get attacks pen and then do my own suffixes, but instead we got double damage focus, managed to have nothing else, and then multi-modded. The alternative is, of course, getting Hand of Wisdom in action, which is just very easy to do. You can do one, you can dual wield, or you can go Energy Blade, or you can craft either a dagger or a claw with the 1 to 6 to lightning mod on it, and then go just with essences, get some good prefixes, and then finish up the suffixes yourself. All pretty reliable things. Crafting these types of things might just cost a bit of money, but pretty reliable outcomes all together in the end. On top of that, you can do dex stack instead, but the kind of strength of this build is the int stack because it lets you get a lot of energy shield and then also synergizes quite well with some of the masteries that I'm about to show you. So then you do the usual Trickster garbage with, evasion, energy shield, all the good stuff, get a bunch of energy shield, etc. And then you have a huge kind of pool to work with for leech, for ghost shrouds. And as you can see, our current defenses, even without any flasks up, any buffs up, 52k evasion, and then flasks, and then actually attacking gives me more too. So it becomes pretty damn thick. But the hero of the situation is increased evasion per 5 int, and then the dexterity portion does no more, but we get a lot from the int. So that takes care of basically all of our evasion scaling. We've also got this guy here, which gain accuracy equal to your int. That takes care of our accuracy rating. And then there's just a lot of synergy because of that. And then once you run Trickster, you get a lot from masteries. And without actually going out of my way, I think I've ended up picking up like 15 different masteries, which is pretty crazy. Usually when I've made a Trickster, you kind of have to bend and turn a few ways to get some like high-end masteries, and it usually gets me to like 11 or 12. This one I think was something like 15 total without recounting, and that was basically just what made sense for the character. So you get a lot of energy shield on kill, which is huge sustain during just regular mapping and stuff, but on top of that, a huge damage portion. We then have the evasion and the energy shield. We also have the big overleech and extra actual leech. And then on top of that, taking one step ahead means chill, freeze doesn't really matter, as well as temporal bubbles and delirium slow zones. So the character isn't really based too heavily around charges, so pretty much just get in there and we're damn near max effectiveness. I guess flasks matter, keeping Trinity up matters, but the more important thing is probably focus, given that my focus does 20% there, another 15% there, and also attack speed on gloves. But if you did Hand of Wisdom and actions, for example, then you wouldn't really need to do the focus thing or rely on focus, but I do like the focus thing, and it does make for a stronger build usually. But tattoos are pretty amazing. You can get Fortify on these types of characters without any real effort, and that's pretty crazy, which, yeah, probably goes away next league, who knows. But once again, you could projectile stack over here if you want to do Molten Strike or something. But yeah, Trickster and Dagger nodes over here give us a whole bunch of damage. I'm not currently using Nightblade in the setup because it does feel a bit weaker after the nerfs to being able to refresh it. I tried it out to begin with, and I don't know, Nightblade probably just isn't worth it. Maybe it's still worth it if you're Claw, and then you can get both of these masteries, and maybe if you're like an assassin, but at the moment it feels like Nightblade just isn't super worth, because even when it starts at max effectiveness, it's decent, but then it goes down, and a lot of the time you're just going to be in the lower portion of effectiveness for it, and it won't really be super worthwhile. Nothing too special for Jules. I am using a combat focus to block the fire portion of this skill, because the fire portion we don't want. It's kind of useless. And it's not very fun for the build. And ideally, like I said, I would have wanted to block the lightning portion as well and be pure projectile. But if we're lightning stacking, blocking with a combat focus means you deal 50% less lightning damage, and that's not viable unless you're only cold damage stacking, which we aren't because we are int stack. We then took a Lethal Pride over here to fix up a bit of extra strength and also get some double damage, intimidate, strength, double damage, and strength. So it's mostly to fix up strength for the build. But otherwise we are int stacking and just get a whole bunch of int, and that's what's happening. So the gear itself, I picked this thing up for not very much, and annulled, and just have int suppress and the good hybrid stuff. So ideally you are just getting the good hybrid stuff on the prefixes, and then doing something for suffixes, hopefully some int. And then attributes there as well. Less damage taken per int is a pretty big implicit for this type of a build, so make sure you get one of those as well. I did a Wild Strike chain enchant this time around because I wanted the chains to do more during bigger clear. It's really not mandatory, but if you do want the Wild Strike chains to do better, then picking up this type of a helm enchant is pretty useful. A lot of fractures, just fractured int and then dense fossil spam. Pretty much dense fossil spam everywhere you go. Dense fossils, dense fossils. You do get a fracture and then dense fossil this, and then just fix the suffixes whenever you want. But these gloves are on the market for 2 divines, so I decided to buy them instead of making my own. 2 additional strikes on the implicit as well, and then this is just a fracture and essence with some resists. And then fix up the prefixes however you want. And then this has to be spite fossils, so not spite fossils, spite essences, because you can't get a natural int roll otherwise. And yeah, just whatever you want on the belt. Energy shield, resists. I did want the lucky crit focus mod, but didn't end up getting a spare suffix, and this belt seemed too good to roll over, so that's what we're going with. Just strength and int on a ring. Picked this thing up for 3 divines. Didn't actually make my own. I just needed strength and int, and this had good lightning roll. Nimmies, which is why we have return proj, but like I said, you could do without it. It wouldn't be mandatory in the build, but it definitely enhances the feel of the Wild Strike. And then also just an int amulet, percent int. This one also had fortify thing on it, so pick that base up for like couple div or something, but the minus evasion, not a big deal. It doesn't really add too much to the build, just a little bit more evasion. And otherwise, once again, either int essences or crit damage essences. I think with this one I went int essences and ended up hitting some crit damage, a little bit of ES and stuff, so I just kept it. But ideally you are going for all stats attributes instead of the resists, and just bigger prefixes. But this one was good enough and did not take much to craft, so I decided to keep it as it is. All in all, my gear is somewhat well-rounded and would be fairly expensive to recreate, as int stackers typically are. An energy blade build might be a bit easier to recreate, especially early into a league with like a ghost shroud, but yeah, I wanted to make sure this was a pretty good build and a good example of a build using Wild Strike. So as far as our links are concerned, we've also got Divergent Wild Strike for 2 additional proj, so that all of our AoE proj do better clear. and then use multi-strike, energy leech, divergent, better leech, and we do get both portions of that as long as we're on full energy shield. Since we are always leeching, and if we're on full energy shield, it's a big support, and usually we are on full energy shield. Early damage attacks, Trinity, which I'm only doing because I have this cold damage roll on my weapon. If you don't have a cold damage roll on your weapon, you won't have really any cold damage to like help Trinity work, and honestly it's kind of scuffed. It'd be probably better that you had no cold damage whatsoever and then used a awakened lightning pen, something like that. But I am doing this setup and yeah, trying to make the most of it. But the Trinity is a bit scuffed in this setup and doesn't always stay up, and it takes a bit to get up sometimes as well, so it's a bit annoying. But in my current situation, I am using it. And volatility, given that most of our damage is coming from lightning and it's already a real low floor with a high ceiling, you may as well use it for an even higher ceiling. So that's links there. We then got Wrath, Grace, Enlighten, and Discipline over here. Mark on hit, Assassin Mark, Precision. Hydrosphere, Arcanist Brand, and Ellie Weakness. Pierce, Lightning Strike, Volatility, and Trinity. And this is just for the Vile Lightning Strike. We don't actually attack with Lightning Strike ever. And then Ancestral Protector, Faster Attacks, Whirling Blades, and a Frostblank. All in all, the build has something like 7 to 10 million DPS, and that amount of DPS gets enhanced by some high rolls, some focuses, and also the return proj portion. But I don't think it's going to have anywhere near the best DPS I've had, but it definitely could if you went more like a Molten Strike proj stacking route, or if you went the Energy Blade route. But currently, this is what it is, and it's much more of just a well-rounded character that I'm hoping can like absolutely face tank things like Simulacrum and some of the Uber bosses, and I'll probably have a follow-up video going on about those when I do the tests later today. As far as the micros, new mystery box stuff and Divergent, and then Apollyon wings. Looks pretty snazzy if you ask me. So I'll leave you guys with someone else's path of building as well. Set up for the Energy Blade build. It's a much more expensive version, but it looks like it's going to perform way higher on the high end for damage. But this is also an extremely strong and viable character. Just int stack Tricksters. Seems like the play. Seems very good. Could even do wonders. Could do all kinds of stuff. It is just juicy. It feels so good to play and map with, and I highly recommend it. Thank you very much for watching. See you guys next time.